I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who lets people walk all over him, but I guess that's exactly who I became. My name's Ryan. I'm 34, and if you asked anyone in my family, they'd probably tell you I've always been the responsible one. The one who works hard, who always shows up, who fixes things quietly without making a scene. I built my first business out of my college dorm room, just a little app that helped local stores organize deliveries. And by the time I was 28, I had enough success to put my student loan days behind me for good. But with every dollar I earned, it wasn't just me who leveled up. It was my parents, my sister, our family's entire way of living. And for 5 long years, I paid for it all. Every mortgage payment, every vacation, every emergency bill they didn't want to handle themselves. They called me the bank, laughed like it was cute, and kept their hands open. I laughed too. At first, it started small, like these things always do. I remember it so clearly. I had just turned 29 and bought a modest but modern place near the outskirts of the city. My parents came to visit a week later, and my dad casually mentioned the rising interest rates on their mortgage. "You know," he said, swirling his coffee like he was brainstorming some genius solution, "if we refinanced using some help from you, we could actually keep the house through retirement." He smiled like it was a fun idea. My mom nodded enthusiastically, like she already knew I'd say yes. I didn't answer right away. I was still calculating the numbers in my head, what it would mean, how it would fit into my budget. But my dad clapped me on the back and said, "It's just a bit of support. You're already doing so well." They made it sound like a favor, like this was a normal thing a good son does. And I guess I wanted to be good. I've always had this ridiculous need to prove myself to them, especially to my dad, who used to say things like, "Real men show up for their families, and money doesn't matter unless you're using it for something bigger than yourself." At the time, it felt like maybe this was my chance to finally be seen as the successful one, the stable one. So I agreed. The first payment felt empowering, like I had stepped into adulthood in the most grown-up way possible. I was helping. I was making things better. They called to thank me that night, said I was a blessing. But 3 months later, my sister called crying about tuition. She had decided last minute to switch universities, some expensive liberal arts school out of state, and the financial aid hadn't come through. My parents were stretched thin, and she'd have to delay a semester unless someone could step in. Guess who stepped in? I wired the money. No questions. No conditions. I just did it. My sister, Emily, didn't even say thank you. She just sent me a heart emoji and a photo of her new dorm. That's when it began. The slow, quiet transformation from being Ryan, the brother and son, to being the bank. It became a nickname in our group texts. Ask the bank. Maybe the bank can fund this year's vacation. Hope the bank isn't too busy working to join us for dinner this weekend. At first, I told myself it was their weird way of saying they were proud of me, that they were just bad at expressing gratitude. But after a while, I stopped laughing, especially when they stopped asking. Christmas that same year was the first time I noticed the shift. We were at my parents' house. Emily had just unwrapped an obnoxiously expensive camera lens, one I recognized because I bought it from her Amazon wish list a month earlier, and my dad was joking about how we should all take a trip to Europe next summer. "Ryan, you'd love Prague," he said, raising his glass. "We'll start planning in January. I'm thinking business class this time. You deserve a break from all that working, Mr. Bank." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but it was hollow. The worst part? I had been working insane hours just to keep up with everything. My business had grown, but so had my expenses. Every time I paid their mortgage, every time I covered Emily's rent or their surprise trip to the emergency vet, I felt like I was chipping away at something inside me. Like I was constantly overdrawing from an emotional account that never got refilled. And the more I gave, the less they saw me. Not just as a son or a brother, but as a person. It's funny. People always say success changes those around you. I used to think that meant jealousy or distance. But in my case, it was entitlement. It was watching my family slowly replace appreciation with expectation. They started texting me like I was customer support. If I didn't reply right away, they'd follow up with, or just send their bank info with no context. There was this one weekend. Emily had flown back for spring break, and we were all having brunch at this overpriced cafe downtown. My mom was going on and on about her yoga retreat and how transformative it had been, and then suddenly she looked at me and said, "You should really try something like that. You've been looking a little exhausted." She meant it as concern, I think. But I remember gripping my fork just a little tighter. I've been working, I said, keeping up with everything. My dad chuckled. That's what the bank does, right? Keep grinding. Emily laughed into her mimosa. No rest for the ATM. Nobody noticed me go quiet after that. Nobody asked how I was holding up. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they made me feel disposable. Useful, but not valued. Like I was a background character in their lives whose only role was to fund the plot. That summer, they booked the Europe trip. Sent me an itinerary, already paid for. We figured it was easier this way, my mom wrote in the group chat. We put it all on your card. Hope that's okay. It wasn't okay. But I didn't say anything. Because back then, I still believed they'd eventually recognize the sacrifice. That someday, someone would pull me aside and say, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. I thought maybe I could earn their love if I just kept showing up. Instead, that fall, I missed Emily's birthday dinner because I had the flu. I texted to say I was really sorry. You know what she replied? Lame excuse, bank. That was the first time I thought, maybe they don't care at all. I didn't stop paying though. Not yet. Because guilt is a powerful leash. And my leash was made of memories. Of my mom singing to me when I had nightmares. Of my dad teaching me to ride a bike. Of Emily clutching my hand on the first day of kindergarten. I kept remembering the good stuff, trying to convince myself the present wasn't as bad as it felt. But it was bad. And it was about to get worse. Because 3 months before the next Christmas, something inside me finally snapped. And that's where everything started to change. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was raining. One of those long, gray autumn downpours that makes the whole world feel heavier. I was in the middle of back-to-back meetings, trying to close a partnership deal that had been months in the making, when my phone buzzed with a string of texts. I ignored the first few, assuming it was spam or some group chat drama. But the fifth message popped up as a notification right on my screen, bold and unmissable. Emily, the rent bounced. Did you forget again? Again? I excused myself from the Zoom call, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the message. My hands felt cold. I hadn't forgotten. I just hadn't sent it yet, because this month, things were tight. Not catastrophic, but lean enough that I needed to prioritize payroll for my employees. I figured I'd pay hers by Friday. Before I could type out a reply, another message came in. Emily, I'm already so stressed. Can you just handle this? It's literally the only thing I asked. No, please. No concern. Just demand. That moment cracked something open. I stared at my phone, thinking about all the months I'd covered her rent, tuition, food, textbooks, flights, Uber rides, everything. And the one time I was 3 days late, she acted like I had personally sabotaged her life. My mind spiraled, flipping back through years of similar moments. Like when she borrowed my car and returned it with a cracked bumper and a shrug. Or when she used my Netflix login and changed the password so her boyfriend could feel more secure. Or when she told our cousin at a family barbecue, loud enough for me to hear, Ryan's rich, but has no clue how to enjoy life. And now she was lecturing me, like I was her employee who forgot to submit a report. Still, I typed out a short reply. Me. I'll send it Friday. Dealing with payroll. She read it right away, but didn't respond. I waited. 1 hour. 2. Nothing. Until later that night, when I got a call from my mom. Sweetheart, she said, tone already dripping with disappointment. Emily told me you didn't cover her rent this month? I sighed. I'm going to. I just need a few days. Business is. She cut me off. Ryan, you know how much stress she's been under. The last thing she needs is to worry about being evicted. She's not going to be evicted, Mom. It's literally 3 days. She said it already bounced once. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Yeah, and it'll clear Friday. Can we not treat me like an ATM? There was a pause. Then she exhaled sharply, like I'd hurt her. No one's treating you like anything. But you have responsibilities. My laugh came out bitter. To who? To Emily? To her rent. To your family, she said firmly. We're all in this together, Ryan. You've always understood that. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The call ended with her passive-aggressively reminding me that real families support each other, and that money shouldn't be a source of tension if your heart's in the right place. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying her voice in my head. The guilt, the pressure, the twisting of my intentions into some moral failing. And slowly, it hit me. They genuinely believed I owed them. Not just money, But my silence, my compliance, my willingness to stretch myself thinner and thinner while they feasted. The next few weeks were rough. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I was met with sarcasm or guilt trips. When I didn't respond to Emily's texts fast enough, she'd message our mom, who'd then call me to check in and subtly push me to respond. One night, I got a Venmo request from my dad for $1,300. No explanation, no context, just the memo, roof repair. Thanks, bank. I didn't send it. A week later, I got a group text from all three of them. Mom, hey, so I noticed the payment still hasn't gone through for the roof. Was it a mistake? Emily, he's probably just busy working. Dad, let us know if there's a problem. We're kind of counting on that. I didn't reply, not out of pettiness, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. I had spent so long keeping the peace that I had no idea how to introduce conflict. Saying no felt like a foreign language, but my silence spoke louder than I expected. 2 days later, my mom showed up. At my house. She didn't call first. She didn't even knock right away. I just found her standing outside my front door, arms crossed, eyes scanning my car like she was inspecting it for damage. I opened the door and blinked at her. What are you doing here? I needed to see you, she said, brushing past me into the hallway. I wanted to talk face to face, since texts clearly aren't working. I stood still. Mom, I'm working. You can't just show up like this. You're always working, she snapped, spinning around to face me. That's the problem. You've buried yourself in this isolated world of numbers and businesses and bank accounts, and you've forgotten what it means to be part of a family. I stared at her, stunned. You think I forgot? I've paid for everything. For 5 years. You guys haven't paid a mortgage payment since 2018. Emily hasn't held a job in 3 years. Every vacation we've taken, every dinner, every flight, I covered all of it. Her face hardened. Because you can. Because you chose this life. You made more than the rest of us. And with that comes responsibility. To take care of all of you? I asked, my voice rising. Is that how you see me? As your employee? She flinched, just a little. No. As your mother. As someone who's done everything for you. You wouldn't be where you are if we hadn't sacrificed for you. That's when something inside me broke. I am where I am because I worked for it, I said quietly. Because I gave up sleep, weekends, relationships. Because I built something from nothing while you kept calling me names and laughing behind my back. Her voice dropped, cold now. You're being selfish. I didn't answer. I walked past her, opened the front door, and gestured. She looked at me like she couldn't believe it. But she left, and that was the moment I knew things couldn't go back to the way they were. The days that followed were oddly quiet. No texts, no calls, no random requests for money. It should have felt like peace, but it felt like the eye of a storm. And I was right, because the real blow came 2 weeks before Christmas. It was a casual Friday. I was catching up on invoices when I got a call from my cousin Mark. We weren't especially close, but we talked enough that I answered. Hey man, he said, sounding weird. Hesitant. So, I heard something, and I don't know if I should be telling you this. What? I was at your parents' house last night. They were having dinner with some family, and I overheard your mom talking to Aunt Liz about a backup plan. Something about pulling equity from your business, just in case things spiral. She said they had all your account info already. My blood went cold. What do you mean, backup plan? I don't know. It sounded like they expected you to crash soon. Like, financially. She said something like, he's stretched so thin, we might have to take control before he tanks it. I barely heard the rest of the call. Because in that moment, I realized my own family wasn't just taking from me. They were preparing for my collapse. And worse, they were planning for it. Positioning themselves to scoop up whatever was left. Like vultures. Like I was already gone. I sat in that silence for hours, staring at nothing. That night, I opened every account, every payment portal, every auto transfer I had linked to them. And I started shutting it all down. Quietly. One by one. No warnings. No explanations. Just silence. It was time to let the bills do the talking. And Christmas was just around the corner. The first overdue notice arrived 6 days before Christmas. It was for the mortgage. One of those polite, corporate emails that starts with, "We noticed your payment is late." Like the bank is just a concerned friend gently tapping you on the shoulder. I saw it because the account was still under my email, though the payments hadn't been mine for over 3 months now. I had removed my auto pay, but hadn't bothered updating my contact info. Maybe a part of me wanted to watch it happen. Maybe I needed proof. 2 days later came the second one, Emily's rent. Same message, same tone. A little more urgent this time. By the third notice, this one for a family phone plan I hadn't realized I was still covering, I started getting calls. Missed call, missed call, missed call. Mom, Dad, Emily. Back to back. No voicemail. Just silence followed by ringing again 20 minutes later. I didn't pick up. It wasn't out of spite. I just wasn't ready. Not emotionally. Not mentally. I was holding something fragile inside me, a quiet strength that was still forming, and if I let them speak to me too soon, I knew they'd find a way to crack it open. So I waited. I focused on my breathing. I worked. I cleaned the house. I went for long walks without headphones. I bought groceries and actually cooked for myself for the first time in months. And for the first time in years, I started sleeping. Really sleeping. No waking up at 3 a.m. to check transfer confirmations. No calculating interest rates in the shower. No staring at the ceiling trying to figure out if I'd forgotten to pay something. The silence that once terrified me began to feel like peace. But peace doesn't come without a storm first. Christmas morning came fast. I didn't go to their house. I had already decided that weeks ago. I stayed home, lit a candle, watched the snow fall out the window. I expected the morning to be quiet, but around 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I even stood up. I opened the door slowly. My parents were standing on the porch, both wrapped in coats, neither smiling. My mom was holding a red and gold tin of cookies. My dad had his hands in his pockets. "Merry Christmas," she said, voice strained. "Hi," I said. I didn't invite them in. There was a long pause before my dad cleared his throat. "We need to talk." I figured. They stepped in without being asked, brushing past me like old habits die hard. My mom set the tin on the kitchen counter like it was a peace offering. I stayed near the door. 3 months, she said finally. "You stopped everything 3 months ago?" I nodded once. "Without telling us." My dad's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Would it have mattered if I did?" I asked. "Would you have taken it well?" They didn't answer. I could see the fury behind my dad's eyes, the panic behind my mom's. It was all catching up now. Missed payments, frozen accounts, canceled cards. And Christmas morning, no less. I wondered how many presents under their tree were bought with money they assumed I'd be transferring. "Why?" my mom asked softly. "After everything we've been through together." I met her eyes. "Because I finally realized we weren't in this together. I was just funding it." "That's not fair," she snapped. "We supported you growing up. We gave you everything." I took a deep breath. "You raised me. You provided for me as parents should. And I'm grateful. I always have been. But that doesn't mean I owe you a lifetime salary." My dad shook his head. "We didn't ask for all of it. You offered." "I did," I admitted. "I offered because I thought it would make me feel closer to you. I thought maybe if I took care of everyone, you'd see me, be proud of me. But all it did was turn me into a bank account with a heartbeat." Silence. Heavy. Real. "We were counting on you," my mom said, barely above a whisper. "And that's the problem," I said. "You didn't prepare. You just expected." They didn't stay long. They left the cookie tin behind. My mom paused at the door, looked like she wanted to say something else, but then just turned and followed my dad to the car. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding, hands shaking, but I didn't cry. I thought I might. But there were no tears left. That was my rock bottom. Not because I was broke, not even close, but because I had finally accepted something I had been avoiding for years. The love I wanted from my family was never coming. At least not in the way I needed it. I had been feeding a machine, hoping it would one day turn around and hug me. It never did. So I stopped feeding it. The days after that were quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one felt earned. I started writing again, something I used to do in college before my business took off. Just journaling. Nothing fancy. But putting my thoughts down helped clear the fog. I went to therapy. For the first time ever. I booked a session with a therapist a colleague recommended, someone who specialized in family enmeshment and financial boundaries. I didn't expect much, but in our third session, she said something that hit me like a truck. "Ryan, what if the version of love you were chasing was never yours to begin with?" That sentence cracked something open, not in a painful way, but like a locked window finally letting in air. I had spent years trying to buy my way into worthiness, into belonging. But the truth was, I was worthy without the money. I just needed to believe it myself. So I started making changes. I hired a new accountant and separated every personal and business expense into airtight categories. I rewrote my will. I created a new company structure that couldn't be exploited without signatures from multiple stakeholders. I set passwords that only I knew, and I deleted every shared folder and document I had ever given them access to. I reclaimed control, one document at a time. I also started saying no in small ways. No, I can't make it to brunch this weekend. No, I won't be covering that missed payment. No, I won't lend you money for a can't-miss investment opportunity. Every time I said no, it felt like lifting a brick off my chest. At first, the responses from my family were confused, then cold, then hostile. Emily sent a long text about how family doesn't turn their backs when things get hard. I didn't reply. My dad called and left a voicemail saying I was disrespecting everything we built together. I listened once and deleted it. But something amazing happened. The world didn't end. No one came to drag me away. My house didn't collapse. My business didn't fail. In fact, for the first time in forever, I started to thrive. I landed a new client, one I'd been chasing for over a year. I revamped my brand and hired 2 new team members. I found myself with extra time. I joined a gym. I cooked real meals. I started waking up without that tight knot in my chest. One night, I took myself out to dinner. Just me. No emails. No clients. No notifications. I sat at a corner table by the window, ordered steak and a glass of red wine, and watched the snow fall outside. I looked around at the quiet restaurant, the hum of conversation, the clink of silverware, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The kind of freedom that isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It just is. It's the space you get back when you stop being someone else's safety net. When you stop stretching yourself so others can stay comfortable. It wasn't easy. It still isn't. Some mornings I wake up and wonder if I did the right thing. If maybe I should have handled it more gently. If I should have warned them. If I should have waited until after the holidays. But then I remember all the Christmas mornings I spent wrapping gifts I paid for, pretending to laugh at jokes made at my expense, nodding while they made plans with my money like it belonged to them. I remember standing in my own living room while they used my name like a punchline. And I know I made the right call. Because here's the thing. I didn't stop being a good son. I didn't stop loving my family. I just stopped letting that love bankrupt me. And soon, they'd learn exactly what that meant. Because the overdue notices weren't just piling up. The consequences were about to get very real. And this time, I wasn't going to bail them out. I didn't set out looking for revenge. I wasn't pacing around my living room like some movie villain, scheming ways to ruin my family. That's not who I am. Or at least, that's not who I was. But something shifted after that Christmas. It wasn't just clarity, it was awareness. I started seeing patterns I used to ignore. Conversations I once chalked up to stress or family dysfunction now read like carefully rehearsed manipulation. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. A week after the holiday confrontation, I got a message from my uncle, my mom's older brother, Glenn. We weren't close. He was one of those relatives you see once a year, exchange stiff hugs with, and forget exists until he shows up at a funeral with a weak smile and an awkward joke. But this message wasn't casual. Glenn, hey, can we talk? I think we need to clear some things up. And I think you deserve to know a few things. That line, you deserve to know a few things, bounced around in my head all night. I called him the next day. We met at a diner halfway between our homes. Nothing fancy, just coffee and eggs and the kind of silence that builds when 2 men who share blood but not history sit down with something unsaid between them. He didn't waste time. Your parents didn't expect you to pull the plug like that, he said, stirring his coffee. They were scrambling after Christmas, asking everyone in the family for short-term loans, blaming you. Said you had a breakdown, that you were having some midlife spiral. I didn't flinch. Not surprised. But what is surprising, he continued, is how long they've been preparing for this. You know your dad almost co-signed a business loan using your company's name. My jaw tightened. What? Yeah, back in September. He told the bank you were on board. They called to verify something, and I overheard the conversation when I was visiting. Thought it sounded sketchy. Didn't realize they were using your name to prop up their credit. I stared at my plate. My appetite vanished. Glenn leaned forward. Look, I know we've never been close, but I've always liked you, Ryan. You were the kid who built your first computer from scraps while the other cousins were still trying to figure out their phones. I watched your parents ride your success like it was a family inheritance. And I stayed quiet because, well, it wasn't my business. But after that Christmas mess, I think you've got a right to know they've been making plans behind your back for a long time. He pulled a folder from his coat. I raised an eyebrow. What is this? Copies of emails. Loan applications. A couple conversations I recorded, just in case. I don't know what you want to do with this, but I figured you earned the truth. I took the folder home. I didn't open it for 2 days. Not because I didn't believe him, because I did, but because opening it would mean confirming what I already knew deep down. This wasn't just entitlement. It was betrayal. Calculated, cold, and quiet. When I finally opened the folder, I read every word. Emails between my father and his financial advisor discussing Ryan's business assets. Drafts of loan applications with my company's name typed in and then scratched out. My mother emailing an estate lawyer asking how to prepare for a future business transition from my name to Emily's, without telling me. One recording stopped me cold. It was my mom's voice, clear and calm. Ryan doesn't ask questions. He just sends the money. He's always been too soft for confrontation. Once we have access to the company, we'll make sure it stays in the family. I sat there, headphones on, hands trembling. That was the moment something dark settled in me. Not rage, not revenge. Just resolve. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as leverage. And I had spent years making excuses for them. No more. That was the night I decided I wouldn't just walk away. I'd make sure they felt it. Not with threats, not with yelling or lawsuits, but with something far more powerful. Silence and consequences. I called my lawyer first. I'd known Martin for 5 years, sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. I trusted him more than I trusted most people in my life. I need a wall, I told him, between me and anything they could possibly touch. He didn't ask questions, just got to work. In the next 2 weeks, we restructured every part of my business. We moved my primary company under a holding entity registered in a separate jurisdiction. We locked down accounts, cut off residual access points, and reviewed every past transaction with forensic detail. You gave them power, Martin said, flipping through documents, but not control. Luckily, I also hired a private investigator. Not because I wanted dirt, but because I needed clarity. I wanted to know how deep the manipulation ran, what else they might have done under my name. If they'd forged signatures, used documents I'd signed for other purposes. The PI found 3 attempts, none successful, but close, to leverage my business credit for private family loans. In parallel, I began preparing something else, something symbolic. A formal statement of separation. Not a legal document. Not a cease and desist. Just a letter. Handwritten. Calm. Detailed. It started like this. To my family, I want you to know that I have loved you. I have given without resentment, supported without condition, and hoped, naively, that my success could be a rising tide for all of us. But you didn't see me as your son or your brother. You saw me as your safety net. That ends now. The rest outlined every payment I'd made over 5 years. Mortgage, tuition, vacations, insurance, emergencies. I didn't include it to guilt them. I included it to remind them of what they took without thanks. The final paragraph read, "From this moment forward, I am no longer available as your financial solution. Not because I don't love you, but because love without respect is slavery. And I won't be enslaved anymore." I didn't send it yet, because I needed the moment to be right. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding my own life. Not the financial side, that was fine. But me. I joined a small group of entrepreneurs who met monthly to talk about boundaries, burnout, and emotional labor. Most of them had their own war stories, siblings who leached off their businesses, parents who demanded ownership, partners who drained them dry. Being in that room made me feel less alone. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who got it. I also started reconnecting with old friends. People I'd ghosted during the years I was working 80-hour weeks and managing 3 people's bills on top of my own. I apologized. Explained. Most were kind. A few were surprised I hadn't spoken up sooner. One night, I invited an old college buddy, Marcus, over for dinner. We talked late into the night. At one point, I told him everything, start to finish. The mortgage, the rent, the vacations. The betrayal. He leaned back, whistling. "Dude, that's not just unfair. That's pathological." I smiled. "Tell me something I don't know. You ever think about telling your story publicly?" he asked. "Not, like, airing dirty laundry, but actually helping people in your situation." The idea stuck with me. I didn't want to be the guy who ranted about his toxic family online, but I did want to do something with the pain. So I started writing, not about them, but about boundaries, about rebuilding, about financial recovery from emotional enmeshment. I posted on business forums, Medium, LinkedIn, no names, no specifics, just lessons. And people responded. Messages poured in. Thank you for saying this. I thought I was the only one. You gave me the courage to stop funding my brother's addiction. I forwarded this to my lawyer. That was when I realized my story wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was a blueprint, not for revenge in the traditional sense, but for taking your power back when love gets weaponized. Still, the final piece was missing. The confrontation, or rather, the reveal. And it was closer than I realized. Because in just a few weeks, my parents would be hosting a New Year, New Legacy party at their house. A bizarre little tradition they started once I got successful. It was their way of showing off, of pretending our family was some dynasty. Every year they invited extended relatives, friends, neighbors, clients, and dropped not-so-subtle hints about how their son had built an empire. This year, I wasn't invited. Not officially, but I saw the invitation through a cousin's Instagram story. They were throwing it anyway, and calling it a celebration of family success. That was my moment. Not to crash it, not to make a scene, but to deliver the truth. Quietly, unforgettably. And when that night arrived, I had a little surprise planned, one they would never see coming. Because the bank wasn't closed. It had been liquidated. The night of the New Year, New Legacy party arrived with all the pomp and pretense I had come to expect. My parents' house glowed like a showroom. Strings of warm lights wrapped around the pillars, a valet service stationed at the driveway, and a large white tent pitched over the backyard, sheltering rows of catered tables and a portable stage. It looked like a wedding reception for someone important, someone rich. And in a way, that's what it was, a celebration of the illusion my family had spent the last 5 years crafting, an illusion funded almost entirely by me. But that illusion was about to shatter. I didn't show up at the front door. I didn't walk into the party with dramatic music playing behind me. That would have been easy, theatrical, and, frankly, beneath the point I wanted to make. Instead, I stayed home, wearing sweatpants, sipping coffee, watching the clock. Because the real show didn't need me in the spotlight. I had already set everything in motion. The first wave hit around 7:42 p.m., just as the party hit full swing. That was when the caterer packed up and left. Not early. Not because of a scheduling mix-up. Because they were never paid. You see, my parents had used a local catering company they'd hired through me years ago for a corporate event. A company that trusted them, because I'd vouched for them in the past. But this time, I called ahead. Quietly. Privately. I explained everything. The history. The abuse. The assumption that I'd cover it. And then I covered the deposit myself, with one condition. If the balance wasn't paid in full by 7:30 p.m., they were to pack up and leave. No questions. No exceptions. And that's exactly what they did. Just as my dad was standing at the microphone thanking everyone for coming, praising the food. I wish I could have seen his face when the servers began dismantling the buffet line behind him. The second wave came 5 minutes later. My cousin Michelle, one of the few people in the family I trusted, walked up to the mic. She had a flash drive in her pocket and a nervous smile on her face. Earlier that week, I'd asked her to play a short video for me. I told her it was a message. One the whole family needed to hear. I didn't give her all the details, but she knew enough to agree. As soon as the sound system reconnected after my dad's awkward attempt to rally the guests, the screen behind the stage flickered on. A simple white background. My handwriting scrawled in black ink. To my family, you call me the bank. But you forgot one thing. Banks keep receipts. The video rolled. 3 minutes. That's all. 3 minutes of quiet, controlled truth. Photos of vacations. Credit card statements with names blurred, but balances clear. Mortgage payments. Tuition transfers. Birthday flights. Holiday rentals. All matched with dates and events that everyone in the room would remember. Then came the final slide. For 5 years I paid. Without complaint. Without recognition. And without a single thank you. A pause. Then another line. Tonight, I want to return the favor, with transparency. Next came a timeline. 3 audio clips. One of my mother laughing and calling me too soft to ever cut them off. One of my dad saying, he doesn't read the paperwork. We just need him to sign. And one final quote from Emily, recorded at a brunch I hadn't attended. He's not family. He's our funding source. The crowd fell silent. Then one more slide appeared. A calm, final message. Going forward, my relationship with each of you will be based on mutual respect, not financial obligation. If you can't separate the two, then this is goodbye. Ryan. The video ended. There was no music, no applause, just silence. The third wave hit at 8:15 p.m. That was when my attorney's courier arrived. He handed my father a padded envelope. Inside was the letter I had written weeks ago, the formal statement of separation. Not just emotional, but financial. It included documentation of every payment made under my name, termination of power of attorney. Yes, I had discovered my parents had forged one. A notice revoking all co-signatures and family trust access. A clause forbidding them from using my business name in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a declaration. An unshakable boundary backed by legal force. They could fight it if they wanted, but they'd lose. And it would get public. Fast. The final blow wasn't legal, though. It was social. Because in that crowd, those friends, neighbors, distant relatives sipping champagne, were people who had always whispered about how lucky my family was. How blessed they were to have such a generous son. Now they saw the truth. The whispers changed. I know, because the next morning, my inbox was flooded with quiet apologies. From aunts. From uncles. Even from my dad's old colleague, who simply wrote, "Didn't realize what you were carrying." Respect. I didn't respond to most. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken louder than I ever could. In the weeks that followed, my parents tried to recover. They posted photos pretending the party had gone off without a hitch. Emily wrote a long Instagram caption about fake family and setting your own boundaries, completely unaware of the irony. But behind the scenes, the cracks widened. Their mortgage, now fully theirs again, became a strain they weren't prepared to handle. Emily's tuition, she missed the next semester. The phone plan was cut off. The private credit card? Closed. They reached out, of course. Emails, voicemails, a handwritten letter from my mom quoting Bible verses about forgiveness and reminding me of the times I held you as a baby. I didn't reply, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Freedom doesn't come with a grand finale. It comes with peace. It comes with slow mornings and clean inboxes. With cooking dinner for yourself without guilt. With going to bed knowing every cent you earned is building your life, not someone else's fantasy. I still think about them sometimes. Not with hate, but with clarity. They were who they were. And I finally became who I needed to be. Not a son chained by guilt. Not a brother trapped by duty. But a man who learned, slowly, painfully, that love without respect is just control dressed in sentiment. I paid the price. But in the end, the return on investment was everything. They called me the bank. But now, the account is closed, the balance is zero, and the door? Locked from the inside.